It was supposed to be an evening filled with joy and laughter. My husband and I had been invited to a casual party with close friends, something we did often. The night started like any other, with everyone in high spirits, sipping drinks and chatting about the usual gossip. The house was beautifully decorated, the music was just right, and the atmosphere was electric. But I had no idea that this night would turn into something far more intense, filled with emotions I never saw coming. As the night progressed, the conversation changed. Laughter became louder, drinks continued to flow, and I sensed a shift in the energy of the room. My husband and his friends had always been close, but tonight something felt different. Their teasing was a little more flirtatious. The glances exchanged lasted longer, and the tension in the room was almost tangible. At first, I thought it was just the alcohol loosening everyone up, but I soon realized there was more to it. At one point, my husband and his friends gathered in a corner, whispering among themselves. I didn't think much of it, assuming it was just an inside joke or maybe a plan for a prank. But when they returned, their behavior had changed. My husband approached me with a smile, though there was something in his eyes that made me uneasy. "We're going to try something new tonight," he said, his voice calm but firm. Before I could ask what he meant, the other men in the room began approaching their wives and girlfriends, suggesting the same idea. It took a moment for me to fully comprehend, but when I did, my heart started racing. They wanted to swap partners. The very thought was outrageous, something I had never even considered. But as I looked around, I saw the women's faces, a mix of surprise, hesitation, and curiosity. I was overwhelmed by a whirlwind of emotions: confusion, fear, excitement, and an odd sense of curiosity. My mind raced, wondering what this would mean for my marriage, for my relationship with my husband. Had he wanted this for a long time? Had he been hiding this side of him from me? More importantly, why was I even contemplating it? The room grew quieter as each couple processed the suggestion. Some women looked just as shocked as I did, while others appeared intrigued. My husband didn't pressure me, but his eyes stayed fixed on me, waiting for my response. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to run, to leave this madness behind. But another part of me, the part that had always craved something exciting and different, was tempted to see where this would lead. The first couple to agree was a shock. They simply nodded to each other, stood up, and moved towards another couple. It all happened so quickly, without much discussion, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Suddenly, the room felt smaller, the air thicker, and I could barely breathe. I looked at my husband, searching for reassurance, some kind of explanation, but all I saw in his eyes was anticipation. He leaned in and whispered, "Only if you want to. It's your decision." I realized then that he wasn't forcing me, but the fact that he was open to this, that he was suggesting it, made me question everything. Did I want to go through with it? Could I handle the consequences? What would this mean for us after tonight? One by one, couples began swapping partners. The room had transformed into something far more intimate, far more charged than I had ever expected. My hands trembled as I watched, unsure of what to do. But then something unexpected happened. One of the men, a friend of ours, approached me. He had always been charming and kind, but tonight he looked at me differently. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, his voice breaking through the chaos in my head. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I truly was. He offered me his hand, and after a brief hesitation, I took it. There was no turning back now. I felt my husband's eyes on me as I stood up, but I couldn't meet his gaze. My heart pounded as I allowed myself to be led away. The room spun around me. We found a quiet corner away from the others, and for a moment everything slowed. I could still hear the laughter and the clinking of glasses, but it felt distant. The man in front of me, my husband's friend, was calm and gentle. He wasn't rushing me, wasn't pushing me into anything. We talked for a while, just small talk to ease the tension, but eventually the conversation stopped, and the air between us grew heavy. He leaned in, his hand brushing mine, and for a moment I felt a spark. It was wrong, I knew that, but in that instant I didn't care. I let myself lose myself in the sensation and the heat of the moment. His lips met mine softly at first, then with more urgency. A flood of emotions washed over me: guilt, desire, confusion. My mind screamed for me to stop, but my body was responding to the situation in a way I hadn't anticipated. I thought of my husband, of what he might be doing at that very moment, and the thought sent a strange thrill through me. Was this what he wanted? Was this some kind of test? Or had he just opened a door neither of us could close? The night continued in a blur of emotions. I found myself tangled in a situation I never imagined I would be in, surrounded by others just as caught up in the moment. It was thrilling, confusing, and terrifying all at once. As the evening came to an end, I couldn't help but wonder what the morning would bring. The party wrapped up, but the emotions lingered. As we drove home in silence, I couldn't bring myself to look at my husband. He didn't speak either, his eyes focused on the road, but I could feel the tension between us. What had we done? What had we become? When we finally got home, the reality of what had happened started to sink in. We didn't talk about it. We didn't mention the party or the swapping. We just went to bed, lying next to each other in the dark, the weight of the night pressing down on us. I wanted to ask him how he felt, if he regretted it, but I couldn't find the words. So we lay there in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. The following days were strange. We avoided the topic, both of us pretending nothing had happened. But the tension was always there, just beneath the surface. Every time we looked at each other, I could see the questions in his eyes, and I knew he could see the same in mine. It wasn't until a week later that we finally talked. One night after dinner, we sat down and my husband asked the question I had been dreading. Do you regret it? I didn't know how to respond. Did I regret it? Part of me did, of course. The guilt had been eating away at me since that night, and I knew things would never be the same between us. But another part of me, the part that had felt alive in a way I hadn't in years, couldn't entirely regret it. I don't know, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, and for a moment I thought he would leave it at that. But then he surprised me. I don't regret it, he said softly, and my heart skipped a beat. I stared at him, shocked by his words. How could he not regret it? How could he be okay with what had happened? He took a deep breath and continued. It wasn't what I expected, but it made me realize something. We've been stuck in a routine for so long, just going through the motions. That night, as strange as it was, reminded me of how much I want to be with you, how much I love you. I don't need anything else, just you. Tears filled my eyes as I listened to him. I had been so afraid that what had happened would tear us apart. But here he was, telling me it had brought him closer to me. I love you too, I whispered, and for the first time since that night, I felt a sense of peace. The road ahead wasn't easy. We had to rebuild trust and work through the emotions that night had stirred up. But in the end, we emerged stronger. The experience, as bizarre and unexpected as it had been, had opened our eyes to what really mattered. Looking back now, I realized that night wasn't just about swapping partners. It was about confronting our fears, our desires, and our relationship. It forced us to communicate in a way we hadn't in years, to face the truth about ourselves and our marriage. While it was a night I'll never forget, it also serves as a reminder that love is complicated, messy, and full of surprises. But as long as we have each other, we can overcome anything. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel for more. Thank you for being part of this journey with me.